The first time I saw him, he looked like someone who had given up too early. He was no older than 20, sharp features, slouched posture, and a black hoodie that looked too heavy for a spring afternoon. He stood just inside the cafe, eyes scanning the room like he wanted to disappear into a wall. Then he walked toward my table, toward her chair. He didn't ask, didn't hesitate. He just sat down. I said nothing at first, watched as he pulled out his phone, scrolled mindlessly, then shoved it back into his pocket like it had failed him for the last time. I sipped my coffee. The seat across from me had been left untouched for months now. No one ever sat there. They usually felt it, that quiet weight, that lingering presence. But this boy, he didn't. Or maybe he did and didn't care. "I can move," he mumbled suddenly without looking up. "No need," I said softly. "She's not coming today." His eyes flicked to mine, dark, guarded, unsure whether to stay or stand. I nodded to his cup. "Order something. You look like you haven't had anything warm in a while." He blinked, and then, for some reason I still don't understand, he stayed. We sat in silence for a long time. I'd grown used to silence, but this was different. Not empty, not heavy, just waiting. Eventually he spoke. "I don't believe in love," he said flatly. No context, no lead-in, just a statement. I looked at him carefully, not to judge, just to see. His hands were clenched around the cup, knuckles pale, a scar running along one wrist, thin, old, almost faded. "I did once," he added, "big mistake. I didn't ask why." People don't say things like that unless they're begging you to stay silent long enough for them to keep going. So I waited. "She said she'd stay," he continued, voice lower now. "But then things got hard. Money, school, my mom getting sick. She said she couldn't carry all of it." He laughed bitterly, as if I asked her to. He shook his head. "People always say love is patient, love is kind, but no one tells you that love is scared, that it runs." I let his words settle between us. They didn't ask for comfort. They asked for space, so I gave it. Then when the air felt lighter, I set my coffee down and spoke. "May I tell you a story?" He glanced at me, shrugged. "Sure, why not?" "My wife loved roses," I began, "but not the store kind. She liked the wild ones, the ones that looked like they were trying." He looked up. "She once told me, even a broken rose can still bloom in the right hands." I paused, let the memory press itself gently against my voice. "She stayed with me through some very hard seasons. Unemployment, a miscarriage, the loss of her sister, and when she got sick, I stayed with her." He said nothing, but his grip loosened on the cup. "Love," I continued, "isn't always about holding hands in the sunshine. Sometimes it's sitting next to someone in the dark and not flinching when they tremble." His lips parted, but he didn't speak. So I leaned in slightly, not too much, just enough for him to hear the truth. "I don't believe in perfect love either, but I do believe in the kind that shows up." He stared at me for a long moment. Then for the first time, his voice softened. "She didn't show up." I nodded and said the only thing that made sense. "That's not love's fault, that's hers." The boy let out a breath, one he'd probably been holding for months. And then slowly his shoulders dropped, his fingers uncurled. He reached into his hoodie pocket, pulled out a crumpled piece of paper, and placed it on the table. A drawing, messy, shaky lines. But I knew what it was. 2 figures, one standing, one sitting on a bench, no hands touching, but both leaning ever so slightly toward each other. "She used to sketch," he said, "but this was the last one she gave me." I looked at it carefully, reverently, then handed it back. "She leaned toward you," I said, "and you leaned back." He nodded. "Maybe that's what love looked like back then," he whispered. "Maybe it still does," I replied. We sat in silence again. This time it didn't wait. It held us, not to suffocate, but to shelter. When he stood to leave, he looked at the chair across from me, the one Eleanor used to fill, the one I'd left empty all these months, then looked at me. "You said she's not coming today," he said. "Does that mean she might come another day?" I smiled. "No, but she already did, for many, many years." He nodded slowly, then reached into his sketchbook again, tore out a new sheet, this one blank. He slid it across the table. For the next person, he said, maybe they'll believe in something again too. I didn't see him again after that, but I kept the blank page, tucked it inside Eleanor's book. A reminder that even those who don't believe in love are usually the ones who need it most. It was her eyes that told me. They weren't red, they weren't swollen, they weren't even glossy. They were steady, cold but not cruel, clear but not calm. Like someone had closed the door to a room full of screams and thrown away the key. She didn't sit down right away. She hovered near the chair across from me, her hand resting on the back of it, fingers tracing the wood like it might break beneath her touch. You mind? She asked. I shook my head. She'd want someone sitting there. She, my wife. The woman gave a small nod, not of understanding, but acknowledgement. Then she sat down, back straight, chin slightly lifted. She folded her coat on her lap, smoothed her skirt, and only then met my eyes. I buried my husband last Thursday, she said. No preamble, no explanation, just fact. I didn't answer, didn't need to. She continued. I wore the blue dress, the one he liked. A pause. I didn't cry. Another pause. I haven't cried. There was no pride in her voice, no shame either. Just a report, like she was reading the weather aloud. She looked out the window. Everyone keeps looking at me like I'm broken, like there's something wrong with me for not falling apart. She turned back to me. But what if I already did? What if I broke 10 years ago when he first forgot my name? Now it made sense. I leaned back, let her words settle like dust. She needed the silence, not comfort, not pity, just space. He had Alzheimer's, she said. He was a professor once, knew 5 languages, quoted poetry in his sleep. She smiled faintly, not with joy, but with distance. And then one day he looked at me and asked, "Are you the nurse?" Her hands trembled once, then stilled. I cried that night, she whispered, in the laundry room so he wouldn't hear. And after that, she shook her head. No more tears, not one, because the man I married, he left long before his body did. She looked at me then, and I saw it. The tiredness, the quiet rage, the loyalty that had cost her more than she ever said out loud. I reached for my cup, sipped, then said gently, I don't think grief always looks like tears. She blinked. I used to think crying was the only proof you cared, she said, that if I didn't sob at the funeral, people would think I never loved him. I nodded slowly. But love isn't for other people to measure. She stared down at her hands. I fed him, bathed him, reminded him of our daughter's name, our wedding song, the way he liked his eggs. She looked up. Isn't that enough? It's more than enough, I said. Crying is just the rain, but what you did, that was the storm shelter. She exhaled, the kind of breath that comes from somewhere buried deep. Sometimes I wonder, she said, if he knew, if in some part of his mind he remembered I stayed. I think he did, I said, because love isn't stored in memory, it's stored in presence. She closed her eyes for a moment, then opened them again. I came here because I used to watch couples sit across from each other in this cafe, she said. And now I'm the one with the empty seat. I looked at the chair between us. It's only empty if no one speaks to it. She tilted her head. Did you talk to her? Every Sunday, I replied. Sometimes just one word, sometimes for the whole hour. She smiled faintly. And did she ever answer? Yes, I said, it's just not always with words. The woman reached into her bag, pulled out a small photograph. Herself, him, a bench under an oak tree. She handed it to me. I hated this picture, she said. I thought I looked tired. I looked at it carefully. You look devoted, I said. She paused, then nodded. I burned most of the others. Too many memories, too many moments he couldn't remember anymore. She looked away, but I kept this one because it was the last time he held my hand. I handed it back to her. Some things, I said, are worth remembering twice. She folded the photo, tucked it back into her purse. Then for the first time, her lips trembled. Just a little, just enough. But no tears came. Still, something had changed. Not broken, but softened. She stood to leave, then looked at me again. I don't know if I'll ever cry, she said. You don't have to, I replied. But if you ever do, make sure it's for yourself, not to prove something to anyone else. She smiled, not a big one, but real. Thank you, she whispered. Then after a pause, for the seat in the silence. As she walked away, I looked at the chair across from me. Still empty, still filled. And I whispered, she showed up too, didn't she? She didn't sit down. She walked past the table once, then again, then stopped just beside it. I looked up and she was staring at the chair across from me, like it was something dangerous, like it might explode if she got too close. You can sit, I said gently. She shook her head. No, I can't. I nodded, didn't push, didn't question. Some people are like birds. You don't reach for them, you wait until they choose to land. She stayed standing, one hand resting on the back of the chair, the other clutching the strap of a worn-out backpack. Her eyes scanned the cafe, then dropped to the floor. She looked no older than 22, hair tucked under a knitted beanie, black boots, scuffed, a tear in the shoulder of her sweater. She looked like someone who hadn't just traveled far, but carried the weight of that distance inside her. I used to come here, she said softly, years ago, with my dad. I leaned back, gestured to the chair beside me. You don't have to sit across from me, I said, just sit somewhere. She looked at me, eyes cautious. Then slowly she pulled out the chair to my right and sank into it. Not the empty one, but close enough. Close enough for her story to find its way out. I left home when I was 17, she said. Ran away, actually. I waited. He was sick, my dad, cancer. She swallowed, fingers tightening around her cup. Everyone kept telling me to prepare myself, to say goodbye. Her voice cracked, just a little. But I couldn't watch him disappear like that. So I left. I nodded, didn't judge, didn't flinch. Where did you go? Nowhere, really. She shrugged. Bounced around, slept on couches, waitressed, tried to write songs, failed a lot. She laughed bitterly. But I never cried, not even once. I let that sit for a moment. Not crying doesn't mean you weren't grieving, I said. She looked at me, eyes rimmed with something unshed. I told myself I was strong, she said, that if I didn't say goodbye, it wouldn't be real. Her lip trembled. She bit it hard, but he died anyway. I placed my hand near hers on the table, not touching, just close. Running doesn't delay death, I said softly, but it does delay forgiveness. She turned to me sharply. You think I need to forgive myself? No, I said, I think you already have. You just haven't admitted it yet. She looked away. The cafe buzzed quietly around us. Chairs creaking, coffee cups clinking, conversations murmuring like wind. But at our table, stillness. I found a letter, she said finally, in my mom's drawer a year after he passed. She reached into her bag, pulled out a creased envelope, slid it toward me. I didn't open it. Didn't need to. He wrote it the day after I left, she whispered. Said he didn't blame me, said he knew it was too much, that he hoped one day I'd come back. Not to him, but to myself. She wiped her cheek, first tear. It's stupid, she said. No, I replied, it's brave. I pointed to the chair across from me. Do you know what this chair is? She shook her head. It's where my wife used to sit, I said. I kept it empty for a long time because I thought leaving it empty meant I was still holding on. And now I said I let others sit in it. People like you, people with stories that need space. She stared at the chair again, then stood, moved toward it slowly, like stepping through fog. She pulled it back, sat down, let the silence wrap around her, and for the first time looked right at me. I don't think I'm done running, she said. I smiled. That's okay. Just know that when you stop, you don't have to start over. You just pick up where your heart left off. She reached into her bag again, pulled out a folded sheet of music, laid it on the table. A song I started years ago, she said, never finished. I glanced at the title. Goodbye is not a word I know. I nodded. Maybe now you do. She smiled, soft, real, then stood up. Thank you, she said. And this time when she walked away, she didn't look like she was running. I looked at the sheet music, the chorus half written, the notes unfinished, and I whispered, goodbye doesn't always mean gone. He arrived before me. That never happened. The table was always mine to claim first. My routine was precise: same cafe, same seat, same hour. But that morning he was already there, sitting in Eleanor's chair. At first, I felt something tighten in my chest. Not anger, not annoyance. Just a shift, as if a ghost had been pushed out of place, as if something sacred had been unknowingly trespassed. He sat with his back straight, a black wool coat hung from the back of the chair, fingers tapping the rim of an untouched cup. He didn't look at me as I approached, just kept staring out the window. But when I reached the table, he spoke first. "You always sit here?" I nodded slowly. "For a long time." "Sorry," he muttered. "Didn't mean to interrupt." "You didn't," I said gently. "I think that seat was waiting for you today." He looked at me then, not with suspicion, but with something older. Fatigue, regret, and something else. A grief so well-worn it had become part of his posture. "I buried my wedding ring," he said suddenly. "No name, no introduction. Just that. I didn't lose it, didn't misplace it. I put it in a box and buried it under the oak tree in our backyard." He paused. 15 years ago. I didn't say a word. Some truths don't require questions, only patience. "She'd been gone a year," he continued. "Everyone said I should move on, that she would have wanted me to be happy." He scoffed. "They didn't know her. She was fierce, possessive in the best way. She wouldn't have wanted me happy. She would have wanted me faithful." He sipped his coffee. Didn't flinch at the temperature. It had gone cold. "After the funeral, I wore the ring like a chain. It wasn't comfort, it was weight. So I buried it. Thought maybe if I put it in the ground, I could stop feeling like I was buried too." I watched his hands. No ring now, just a pale band of skin where it had once lived. "I haven't been back since," he said. "Sold the house, moved across the country, started over. But lately, I can't stop dreaming about the ring." He chuckled dryly. "Isn't that pathetic?" "No," I said quietly. "It's honest." He looked at me again. This time his eyes were damp. "She loved jasmine tea," he said. "I hated it. Tasted like perfume. But now I'd drink a gallon of it if it meant hearing her say my name again." A long silence settled between us. Not heavy, just respectful. Then I asked, "Why today?" He shrugged. "I flew back last night, drove by the old house. The oak tree's still there." He paused. "But the people living there now, they turned the yard into a playground, swings, a sandbox." He laughed bitterly. "My ring is probably underneath some kid's plastic shovel." I smiled softly. "Or maybe," I said, "it's exactly where it needs to be." He tilted his head. "Meaning?" I sipped my coffee before answering. "Sometimes we bury things thinking we're letting go, but really we're just planting them. And love, real love, has a way of growing even when we stop watering it." He sat back, digesting that. Then, almost a whisper, "I'm scared to dig it up." I nodded. "Because you're not sure what you'll find." He shook his head. "Because I'm not sure who I'll be if I do." We sat in silence again. Outside, a breeze stirred the branches. A leaf fluttered by the window like a sign from somewhere else. Then he leaned forward. "There was a note too," he said. I raised an eyebrow. "In the box?" He nodded. "She wrote it when she knew she was dying, said not to read it until I was ready to live again." His voice broke. "I never opened it." I placed a hand on the table, not touching his, just close enough. "Do you have it?" He nodded. "In my coat pocket." I gestured. "Then maybe it's time." He hesitated, then slowly reached into his coat, pulled out a worn envelope, unsealed, unopened. He laid it on the table. We both stared at it, like it might burst into flames, like it might whisper her voice. Then with shaking hands, he opened it, unfolded the paper, eyes scanning, mouth trembling. He didn't read it aloud. But when he finished, he pressed it to his chest, closed his eyes, and for the first time, he wept. I said nothing. Let the tears fall. Let the moment be sacred. Let grief have its voice. After a while, he placed the letter gently back in the envelope, tucked it inside his coat, then looked at me. "She said I was her favorite adventure," he whispered, "that she hoped I'd keep walking even after she stopped." He smiled. "A real one, worn but real." "She gave you permission," I said. He nodded. "But more than that, she gave me direction." He stood to leave, then paused. pulled something from his wallet, an old photograph, faded, torn at the edges. Her, smiling, hands in the dirt, planting something. He handed it to me. "For the table," he said. "Maybe she'll sit with you for a while." Then he turned, walked away, shoulders lighter, steps steadier. Not because the grief had gone, but because he finally knew where to carry it. I looked at the photograph, placed it beside Eleanor's book, watched as the sun spilled across both, and whispered. She stayed with him even after the ring was gone. He didn't look like someone who carried pain. He wore a suit, clean, pressed, like he had somewhere important to be afterward. Hair combed with precision, shoes polished to a quiet shine, a watch that ticked just a little too loud. But I've learned something over the years. Grief doesn't always look messy. Sometimes it shows up in perfectly tied ties, in punctuality, in silence. He stood by the table for a moment, looked at the empty chair, then at me, then back at the chair. "Is this seat taken?" I nodded. "Always," I said. He didn't seem surprised, but he didn't walk away either. He looked around the cafe, then gestured to the seat beside me. "What about that one?" "It's free," I said. He sat down slowly, as if the act of sitting required permission from somewhere inside himself. "I don't usually talk to strangers," he began. "That's okay," I replied. "I don't usually talk to anyone but ghosts." He smiled, just slightly, then looked down at the table. "I lost my mother last week." I didn't respond, just listen. She was the only one who ever understood me, the only person I didn't have to pretend around. He ran his finger along the rim of the coffee cup. "They tell me I should be grateful she lived a long life, that she died peacefully, that she's in a better place." He looked up, and in that moment, the smile disappeared. Then he asked it, the question no one ever dares to ask. "Does it ever stop hurting?" Time slowed. The cafe faded, and that single question echoed louder than any laughter, any heartbreak, any goodbye I had ever known. I didn't answer right away. I wanted to. I wanted to say yes because that's what people want to hear. But I couldn't lie, not here, not in front of that chair, not to someone brave enough to ask out loud. "No," I said softly. "It doesn't." He looked away. I let him, then added, "But it changes." His head turned back, curious. "You learn to carry it differently, not lighter, just differently." He sat back, arms crossed, defenses faltering. "How?" he whispered. "How do you carry something that heavy forever?" I looked at my hands, wrinkled, weathered, still trembling sometimes, but steady enough to hold the weight. "You build muscles around it," I said. "You learn its shape, where it fits, where it pokes. You learn how to walk without letting it knock you over." He didn't speak, but something in his posture softened. Then, like a confession, I keep waking up expecting to call her. I pick up the phone and then I remember. His throat tightened. And then I don't know what to do with the silence. I leaned in. "You talk into it." He blinked. "What?" "You talk into the silence. You say the things you wish you said. You tell the stories again. You ask the questions you know she'll never answer." He looked at me, surprised. "That helps." I nodded. "Some days. Others, it just reminds me that I still need her. But that's okay." The cafe grew a little louder around us. But at our table, time stayed still. He pulled something from his coat pocket, a photograph, worn at the corners. A woman with bright eyes, arms around a little boy who looked so much like the man now sitting beside me. "She used to hum when she cooked," he said, "even when she was sick." He paused. "She made the kitchen feel like home, even when it smelled like medicine." I took the photo gently, held it with both hands, then passed it back. "She loved you more than she feared leaving," I said. His eyes welled. Then he did something I didn't expect. He reached across the table, took my hand. Not tightly, not desperately, just human. "Thank you, he whispered. "For not lying," I smiled. "For asking the question." He stood up slowly, like the gravity had shifted. But before he left, he turned back to the chair, the one across from mine, then looked at me. "Is it okay," he asked, "if I come back sometime, just to sit?" I nodded. "That's what the chair is for." He left. But the silence he carried stayed a little longer. And for once, it didn't feel empty. It felt like possibility. I reached into my coat, pulled out Eleanor's old notebook, opened to a blank page, and wrote, "Pain doesn't leave, but it learns to sit beside us without demanding all the space." I didn't know her name. She never told me. She simply came in one morning, a woman in her 60s, hair in a careful bun, wearing the kind of coat that said she once believed in rainy day walks and hardcover books. She didn't sit right away. She walked the cafe first, like she was looking for something that wasn't furniture. When her eyes landed on the chair across from me, Eleanor's chair, she paused, then said softly, "May I leave something?" I nodded. She pulled a small sealed envelope from her bag, placed it gently on the table, face down. No name on the front, no address, just one line on the back for the words I never said. She didn't sit, didn't order coffee, didn't stay. She left as quickly as she came. I stared at the envelope for a long time. Didn't open it, didn't move it. Something about the way she placed it down, like laying flowers on a grave, told me this wasn't mine. But then again, that chair wasn't mine either, not anymore. I left the letter untouched for 3 days. Came back each morning, watched it sit there, still, unmoving, unclaimed. Clara asked once, should I throw it out? No, I said. Some letters don't belong in the trash, even if they were never mailed. On the 4th day, I arrived early. As always, the letter was still there. But this time I placed my fingers on the edge of the envelope, felt the weight of its silence. Then slowly I opened it. The handwriting was delicate, precise, like someone who had learned long ago how to hold back everything except ink. It began, "I didn't say it when I should have, and now you're gone, and I don't know where to put all these words." My hands trembled. I continued reading. "You asked me once if I ever regretted the way we ended. I said no, but that was a lie. I regretted it every time I heard our song at the grocery store, every time I passed by the park bench where we argued about nothing, every time someone looked at me kindly, and I remembered how you used to look at me when I was doing something as silly as brushing my teeth. I wasn't ready then to love you the way you deserved, to show up when it wasn't convenient. And when I finally was, you had already stopped asking." I paused, took a breath. The words felt too familiar. Not because they were mine, but because they could have been. So here it is, the apology I never gave, the truth I buried under pride, the goodbye I whispered after it was too late. I loved you, I did, in all the wrong ways, and not nearly enough of the right ones. But I loved you, and I still do. There was no signature, no initials, just a blank space where a name should have been, like the writer knew that whoever was meant to receive it already would. I folded the letter, placed it back in the envelope, set it on the edge of the table. Then I looked at the chair, the one across from me, where Eleanor used to sit, where strangers had sat since, where pain had visited, where healing had whispered. And I said, "This one's for you too." That afternoon, a young woman sat down at the table. She looked nervous, fidgety, wearing too much eyeliner to hide how tired she looked. She pointed to the envelope. "Can I read it?" she asked. I hesitated, then nodded. She read silently, her lips barely moving, then closed her eyes. When she opened them, they were wet. She whispered, "I could have written this." "No," I said gently, "you were meant to read it." She smiled, took a breath. "I think I'll write one too," she said. "To him." I nodded. That's the beauty of unwritten letters. They still find their way. After she left, I picked up the envelope one last time, turned it over, and on the back I wrote, "Delivered, in silence, in time, in truth." Then tucked it inside Eleanor's notebook, right beside all the memories I never shared aloud. That night, I sat by the window, the letter still echoing in my head. All the words we don't say, all the people we lose before we understand them. And I whispered, sometimes the truest things we ever feel, we never get to say out loud. She had been there from the beginning. Clara, always in the back of her room, always in motion, a blur of brown curls, navy aprons, and the gentle clink of china. She never spoke more than necessary, just a polite nod, a half smile, a refill placed down with quiet care. And I never asked her anything, because she never asked me anything, until that morning. It was quieter than usual. A light drizzle painted the windows in soft streaks. The usual crowd had thinned. The regulars stayed home. Only Clara and I seemed to have kept our promises to Sunday. She brought me my coffee, and as always, the second cup, Eleanor's cup. She placed it across from me, but this time she didn't walk away. She pulled out the chair, Eleanor's chair, and sat down. I blinked. It had been years, so many Sundays, so many silent exchanges, but she had never once sat. She folded her hands in her lap. Her apron was slightly wrinkled. Her name tag hung a little crooked. She looked at me, not with pity, but with patience, and asked gently, "Why do you come here every week?" The question didn't surprise me, only that it had taken this long. I looked at the chair she now occupied, then at her face. She wasn't just asking for herself. She was asking for every stranger who had passed by, every regular who had wondered, every soul who had seen the extra cup and said nothing. I took a sip from my cup. The first year I came because I didn't know where else to go. I said, she had died, and everything at home felt too loud, too empty. Clara nodded once. Oh, I didn't interrupt. The second year I continued, I came because I was afraid that if I stopped, I'd forget the sound of her voice. My fingers traced the rim of the second cup. "And the years after that?" she asked. I smiled softly. "I come because this is where she still shows up." Clara tilted her head slightly. "She's gone," she said, not cruelly, just factually. I nodded. "I know, but grief doesn't need a body to keep company. It just needs a seat." She glanced around the cafe. "I've watched people sit in that chair," she said. "I know. Some cried, some smiled, some just listened." "Yes. And you never once asked them to leave?" "No." She looked me in the eyes. "Why?" I paused. The answer came slowly, carefully, like a memory walking barefoot across a wooden floor. "Because we all have someone we're still talking to, someone who left, someone who didn't say enough, or who said too much too late." I looked down at my hands, and when people sit in that chair, they're not replacing her. They're visiting something inside themselves. Clara was quiet for a long time. Then she reached into her apron, pulled out a small folded piece of paper, set it on the table. "I found this a year ago," she said, tucked behind the counter. "I think it was hers." I opened the paper. It was Eleanor's handwriting, instantly recognizable, elegant, measured. It said, "He thinks he's the one who comes to remember, but it's me who returns to watch him keep his promise." My chest tightened. I held the note gently, afraid even my breath might smudge it. "She left it?" I asked. Clara nodded. I didn't know what to do with it, so I waited until I knew the time was right. We sat in silence, not the kind that asked questions, the kind that answered them. Finally, Clara stood. She smoothed her apron, picked up the second cup, and for the first time in years, she didn't refill it. She just placed it gently in front of me, full, untouched. "For her," she said. Before she turned to leave, she looked back at me. "I think she's proud of you," she said, "for staying, for sharing the chair." I smiled. She made it easy, even in her absence. Clara took a breath, then said the words I never expected. "Do you mind if I sit here again next week?" I looked at her, really looked. The years in her eyes, the losses she never spoke of, the kindness she poured into cups. And I said, "The chair's always been waiting for you." That night, I placed Eleanor's note inside her notebook, tucked it beside all the others. And I whispered, "You were never the only one who returned." She didn't say a word. She walked into the cafe that Sunday like any other customer, coat still damp from the morning rain, shoulders hunched, eyes scanning the room with the quiet desperation of someone searching for a place to hide. But she didn't hide. She walked straight to my table, straight to Eleanor's chair, and then she did something no one else had ever done. She placed a folded envelope on the table, nodded once and walked out. Not a single word, not a glance back. I waited. Maybe she'd return. Maybe it was a mistake, wrong table, wrong old man. But the door closed behind her with a finality I couldn't ignore. And the envelope stayed. Plain white, edges damp from her fingers. No name, no address, Only one thing written in the corner. He'll understand. I stared at it for a long time. Clara brought me my coffee. Paused. She didn't say anything, she asked. I shook my head. She didn't have to. I didn't open the letter right away. I let it sit there next to Eleanor's cup, next to the silence that had grown familiar. Some letters asked to be read. Others, they asked to be felt. But eventually my fingers found their way to the seal, and I opened it. The handwriting was rushed, like the words had been bottled too long and burst out all at once. It read, I never knew how to say it, not to his face, not to anyone, but I think he deserves to know. We were 19. He worked at the bookstore near the college. I pretended to love poetry just to keep talking to him. He used to read Neruda out loud when no one was watching. Tonight I can write the saddest lines. God, I hated that line because I knew one day it would be true. He wanted to leave the city, travel, take pictures, write a book about the people we met. I wanted to stay, get married, raise children who wore clean socks and said please and thank you. We weren't wrong, just wrong for each other. We said goodbye like it was temporary, but it wasn't. I saw him again years later. He had lines under his eyes and a kindness I hadn't earned. He smiled like it didn't hurt, so I pretended too. I watched his life from afar. He never married, traveled a lot, published a book of photographs. The dedication read, for the one I left behind so I could find myself. I used to think he meant someone else, but now I know. This is my apology, late, uninvited, unfinished. But if he ever wonders, if it ever kept him up at night, please tell him he was always the one. There was no name, no signature, only that line in the corner again. He'll understand. And somehow I did. Not because I knew who she was, not because I could place the story, but because I had been him once, more than once. The silence after I read the letter wasn't heavy, it wasn't even sad. It was reverent, like the air had decided to listen, just for a moment. Clara passed by again. She saw the open envelope, the letter, my face. She wrote to you? She asked softly. I shook my head. She wrote to him. I just happened to be the one holding the space. Clara sat down, no apron this time, no tray, just herself. She picked up the letter, read it quietly, then looked at me. There's something beautiful about unfinished stories, she said. I smiled. They leave room for hope. I placed the letter inside Eleanor's notebook, tucked between the photograph of the woman under the oak tree and the sketch from the boy who didn't believe in love. Then I turned the page and wrote, to the one he never forgot. He carried your silence like a folded note in his pocket. And today it finally opened. The chair across from me stayed empty that afternoon. But I swear, when I looked out the window, I saw a woman in a raincoat walking away with a little less weight on her shoulders. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't wonder who she was. Because I knew what she had become. A letter, a memory, a release. He didn't ask. He didn't pause, didn't hesitate, didn't hover like the others always did, sensing some invisible barrier around that chair. He walked into the cafe, looked around once, then headed straight for the table, for her chair, and sat. I looked up, expecting him to stand again, to apologize, to realize he'd stepped into something sacred, but he didn't. He just sat, comfortably, casually, like the chair had always been his. He wore a gray sweater, frayed at the cuffs, a pair of glasses hung from his collar by a string, and his hair, what was left of it, was silver and wild. He looked about my age, maybe older, maybe lonelier. Clara glanced at me from the counter, her eyes asking, "Is this okay?" I gave a small nod. I didn't know why, but it was. The man leaned back, exhaled deeply. "That's a good chair," he said. I raised an eyebrow. "You've sat in it before?" He shook his head. "No, but I've watched it for years." That made me pause. "You've watched?" He nodded. "I come here every other Sunday, sit near the window, same table." He pointed. "And every time you're here with 2 cups, one always full, one always waiting." I smiled gently. "You never asked?" "Didn't need to," he replied. "Grief speaks its own language." I understood enough. There was a silence, but it wasn't uncomfortable. Not the kind that waits for a story. It was the kind that recognizes one already being lived. I lost my wife too, he said, eyes fixed on the window. I nodded. How long ago? He shrugged. Time doesn't count the same after someone leaves. But if you insist, 12 years. He turned to me. You? 8. We sipped in tandem. 2 old men, 2 cups, 1 memory between us. I never kept a seat for her, he said after a while. Why not? Because I didn't believe she'd ever fully left. He tapped his chest. She stayed here. Made too much of a home in me. Didn't leave a room for anyone else. I understood that. I really did. She was loud, he said, suddenly smiling. Mine was quiet, I replied. Mine never let me win an argument. Mine never picked one. We both chuckled. 2 lives, 2 loves, 2 ends. I saw you once, he said, looking down. You were crying, but you smiled through it like someone had told you a joke from another world. I nodded slowly. I was remembering the time she dropped a plate in front of my boss, then blamed it on the wind. We laughed again, the kind of laugh that comes from somewhere long buried. I never came closer, he said. Didn't want to intrude. But now, he sighed. Now I think I needed someone who understood. I looked at him, really looked, not as a stranger, but as a mirror, and said, you don't need permission to sit in a place where pain has already made room for you. He closed his eyes for a moment, then opened them slowly. I brought something, he said. He pulled a small notebook from his coat, worn leather, tied with string. He placed it on the table, pushed it toward me. I wrote letters to her, he said, every Sunday, for 12 years, but never mailed them, never burned them. Why give them to me? He looked at Eleanor's cup. Because I think your table has been waiting to carry more than just your memories. I untied the string, opened the first page. Her name, Margot, in swirling, fading ink. Then the first letter, written the week she passed. Dear Margot, the coffee is colder without you, even when it's hot. The house is quieter, even when the radio plays. The air is heavier, even when the windows are open. I closed the book. It wasn't mine to read, not yet. But it had found the right table. I'll keep it here, I said, in her notebook. He smiled. And for the first time since he sat, he looked at the chair beneath him, ran his hand along the armrest. She would have liked this place, he whispered. She would have liked you, I said. He stood, not abruptly, not regretfully, just with the grace of someone who had finally put something down. I won't come every week, he said. I think this place belongs more to her than to me. I nodded. But you're always welcome. She won't mind. He chuckled. Funny thing, he said. I spent 12 years writing to her, but today's the first time I feel like she answered back. He left, and this time the chair didn't feel empty. It felt full, not with memory, not with sorrow, but with a quiet sense of shared space. I looked at the notebook, at Eleanor's cup, at the sunlight pouring through the window, and whispered, maybe we were never meant to keep our grief alone. It started with a question, not from a stranger, not from a barista, not from someone passing by. This time, the question came from me. I sat at the same table, Eleanor's cup in its place, notebook open, pen resting beside it. But the chair across from me, this time it wasn't empty, it wasn't filled either. It simply waited, and I whispered into the quiet, what now? For years, the chair had been a shrine to love, to loss, to memory. Then it became something more, a seat for others, a vessel, a mirror. Each person who sat there, they brought their own echoes and left behind something new. But now, as the light shifted across the wooden floor, as the cafe buzzed faintly with its usual rhythm, I felt something stir, a shift, a breath. And the answer came, it's time. I didn't hear it exactly, not with my ears, but with something else, something deeper, like a page turning itself in my chest. Clara approached. She didn't bring coffee. She brought a notebook, worn, leather-bound, edges soft from being held too tightly. She placed it gently on the table. For you, she said. I raised an eyebrow. I already have one. She smiled. This one isn't for remembering. It's for teaching. I opened it. The first page was blank, but beneath the cover, tucked inside, was a note. In Clara's handwriting, you're no longer the one who waits. You're the one they come to. I looked around the cafe. The boy who didn't believe in love. He now came in with a sketchbook, leaving poems on napkins. The woman who refused to cry. She'd begun hosting a book club in the back corner, wearing her husband's old scarf with pride. The girl who ran away, she had returned again, this time with a guitar slung over her back. And Clara? She didn't just serve coffee anymore. She listened. She watched. She wrote. And me? I had become something I never expected. Not a keeper of grief, not just a man in mourning, but something else, something larger, a storyteller. Not for fame, not for attention, but because the stories didn't belong to me anymore. They belonged to the chair, to the table, to the space between two cups and 1,000 unsaid goodbyes. I spent the afternoon writing, not about Eleanor, not entirely, but about the boy with the drawing, the woman with the photo, the man who buried his ring, the waitress who waited years to ask, the stranger who sat without permission, and the one who left a letter without a name. I wrote their pain, their pauses, their half-finished sentences in unopened envelopes. And then, on the very last page I wrote, grief didn't leave, but neither did I. And in staying, I found something better than healing. I found meaning. That evening, I left the cafe later than usual. The chair stayed behind, but not empty, not anymore. Now it was a beginning. I walked out into the cool dusk, notebook in hand, heart somehow both heavier and lighter. And I whispered, not to the wind, not to the sky, but to the seat that had carried every story home. Thank you for waiting. Now, let's begin again.